everyone, and welcome to the Voice of Verve, the official news podcast for Issue 5. I'm your host, Finley, and today's episode is all about stories that connect our community to a bigger world around us. From a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Washington, D.C., to deeper conversations about faith, global conflict, and sharing the truth across cultures. Here at Verve, our goal isn't just to report what's happening, it's to tell meaningful stories, highlight real experiences, and ask questions that matter. In this episode, we're featuring two different conversations. First, we'll hear from our staff writer, Ben Soucy, who sat down with Tara Timms, an 8th grade history teacher, to talk about their recent trip to Washington, D.C., including the incredible opportunity to tour the White House and experience history firsthand. Then, later in the episode, I'll be sharing a part of a conversation that I had with Verve alumni Caroline Walker. We talk about something much deeper, how faith plays a role in global conflict, specifically looking at the situation in Iran, and what it means to share the gospel with Muslims in a respectful and impactful way. This second conversation connects directly to an article I wrote for Issue 5, so if you're interested in going deeper into that topic, you can check that out in the newspaper. So whether we're talking about history, travel, or faith, today's episode is really about one thing: understanding the world more clearly and thinking more deeply about our place in it. Let's get started. Washington, D.C. is often seen as the center of American history and government, but for students and teachers, it can also be a place where you can learn and the classroom becomes real. Recently, a group had the opportunity to visit D.C. and experience that history up close. Our staff writer, Ben Soucy, spoke with Miss Tara Timms about their trip, what they saw, and what stood out the most, including a pretty unforgettable visit to the White House. One of the most unique parts of this trip was an unexpected connection. TKA alumni Isaac Apon, who works with President Trump as a photographer, was able to meet up with the group and give some of them a behind-the-scenes look at the White House. It's not every day that students get access to something like that, and it definitely made the experience much more memorable. Here's that interview.
And then once you guys were in there, I mean, what was that like? It's you guys get to see something not a whole lot of people do.
No, we didn't. We did the regular tours, but we did get to talk to Isaac for a long time.
Okay.
And so they got to hear like what it's like to travel with the president, that the president actually really only does sleep 3 or 4 hours a night, and when he's not sleeping, he's working. And we don't hear, the media is very critical and, he never does anything. And he works all the time and his mind is always on the job. And Isaac said that he's doing multiple things at one time and knows exactly like what is going on. The best thing I think that he said to the kids was, because they asked like, what would you suggest for our lives, basically? He said, follow Christ. Like make Christ the center of your life. And from there, everything else will fall into place. He talked about that he's always 3 to 5 feet from the president, and that while he's there, he's not doing anything but taking pictures. So he's praying. For whatever the president's doing, he's praying.
Yeah.
And just how sweet that is to know that we have a man walking in the president's shadow praying for him at all times.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's super cool.
I checked out some of his socials and like I saw all of it was like doing this for Christ, stuff like that, and I really appreciated that.
Everywhere we go in D.C., the way our kids are commented on about how good their behavior is and how our guide said that he has never been with a group that found favor with so many people in D.C.
Yeah, I remember that being a thing when we went too. It was like, especially when we went to the 9/11 memorial.
Yes.
Which was honestly a super cool experience.
It was a cool experience. We didn't go to 9/11 this year. We couldn't squeeze in. We had so many other appointments.
But you guys got the White House.
We got the White House on the top of Washington Monument. Like we scored some good stuff.
That is really cool.
Yeah. We also, the 8th graders, and this isn't White House, but our 8th graders got taken into a back part of the Capitol because the guy asked, are these kids always this good? And I was like, yeah, they really are. He said, all right, I'm going to take them where they're not supposed to go. And so they went and saw the old Senate room and old Supreme Court room. And the guy, when we were walking in, he was shaking his head no. And he goes, this is for private tours. And he goes, I don't care. I can take these kids where I want to take them. And so he showed us that area, which was really cool. And the kids were all like very proud of themselves. And we kind of toured then through the back and went back around a different way, which you wouldn't know. It's just hallways. But it was just cool that they got to be rewarded for good behavior. So,
that is really awesome.
Yeah.
But could you talk a little bit about what like seeing the West, if you can, what seeing the West Wing was like?
So Isaac did a 2-hour tour with us. We had to get back at 9:00, and the West Wing tour, not everybody gets them. He said only about 1% of the visitors ever get you have to have an escort. The escort has to have a security clearance. So just the fact that he has a security clearance because he travels with the president, he was able to do a private tour for us. He wouldn't have been able to do it if we had not done the White House tour earlier, so we'd already done the security clearance.
Okay.
So we'd already done that. But he took us, he showed us where the skiff was, where they get top secret. We didn't get to go in, but he showed us the doors.
Yeah.
We got to see where we had to leave our phones outside, and we couldn't carry a camera, phone, watch, nothing with you. And then he took us and showed us where all the offices were. We got to stand outside the Oval Office and look into the Oval Office. He took us where they have the cabinet meetings. We got to see inside the cabinet meeting room. We got to see inside the room where anytime they do a presidential interview on any of them, they go to this room, the cabinet room, and the Roosevelt room, and they allow them to come up, set it up the way they want it, the news networks, and then they go in there and they do the interview at the White House with his security in those rooms.
Were you allowed to go in those rooms?
We could stand outside.
Stand outside of them.
We were not going anywhere.
Oh, okay.
You just,
but the press room you went into.
we went into the press room, which is tiny.
What do you think was the highlight from the DC trip for both of you?
I think the White House was good. I was disappointed in the White House because we usually get to go a little further in. But I knew with the Japanese emperor. But the White House definitely was a highlight. I don't know. What was the highlight for you? I mean, the West Wing.
I don't know. I think the thing for me is I've been here for 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
I taught Isaac Abrams.
Yeah.
I taught him government and I taught him U.S. history. So I think the fun thing for me was to see one of our students in the next portion of his life being successful and seeing how humble he still was. And so that was really, I mean, that to me, it also showed the kids that there's another step, and that as long as you're walking in Jesus, this is something that you could do too.
Okay, so now that I think the highlight for me was what I said in the very beginning, was the amount of favor and the praise that our kids got for their behavior. That our kids looked different.
That's awesome. That sounds like a great note to end on.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being willing to stay after us.
Wow, that was such a cool experience to hear about. I think what really stands out is how different it is to read about history versus actually standing in the places where it happened. Trips like that don't just teach facts, they give you a new perspective. Being able to walk through places like Washington, D.C., and especially something as significant as the White House, is something most people don't get to experience. It definitely makes what you learn feel more real and more meaningful. It's also a reminder of how connected we are to the past, and how those moments in history will shape the world we live in today. But while history helps us understand where we've been, there are also things happening right now in the world that challenge us to think about where we're going. In my next conversation, I spoke with Verve alumni Caroline Walker about something much more complex, how faith intersects with global conflict. Specifically, we talked about the situation in Iran and how Christians can approach sharing the gospel with Muslims in a way that is thoughtful, respectful, and rooted in understanding. This is something I explored more deeply in my article for Issue 5, and this conversation really brings some of those ideas to life. Here's part of that interview. Did you have to share the gospel with Muslims?
I really didn't share the gospel with anyone who was Muslim until I felt like I had a good understanding of what they believed, because I felt like in order to share what I believed, I needed to understand and be able to fully respect what they believed. And so we went to a conference, my team and I, in February. And so I'd been in Indo about 6 months, and we went to a conference about how to share the gospel with someone who is Muslim. And that really opened my eyes to how to do it, because I didn't understand the root and the depth of Islam. So after that, honestly, it's not like what you typically think of evangelism being, where you are just going to share the 3 circles with someone and all of a sudden they're going to believe. It's more relational. And so the coolest conversations I had and the best opportunities I had came from working on relationships with people for 6 to 8 months before my faith would even come up, because I needed to build that trust first, because our religions were so similar. It was really difficult, honestly, but I think I learned the best way to do it was to build a deep relationship with them.
Yeah, that's really good. And that leads me perfectly into my next question. You said you knew, like, you got to know a little bit about their religion in order to share our religion. So why do you think, like, hardship, like maybe what's happening in Iran right now, like, can make Muslims more open to faith?
Well, on top of all of the situations happening all over the world and all of the world conflict, we also just came out of Ramadan season. And so all of the Muslims have been more devout in their prayer and in their seeking of Allah, which is who they refer to as God. But because they are not worshiping the one true God and they don't have a true relationship with God, they're not hearing from God, which is what they're seeking to do in Ramadan, and honestly what they're seeking to do because of like the unrest and all of the conflicts all over the world right now. And so I think that their desperation and their hurt and their pain can lead them to either realize that Islam and Allah are not answering their prayers, it's not fixing their problems, and realize there must be a different solution, or it encourages them to like run away from everything or like keep worshiping Allah harder. So I think it's a great opportunity for people to really share what they believe in, the hope that we have in Jesus and the hope that we have in eternal life. Like our earthly life, it's gonna fade away, but we have an eternal hope and an eternal life in heaven. But I think it's important to use the hope that we have and the faith that we have, knowing that this world is not our home and knowing that we have an eternal home where there is so much peace and there's so much joy and there's not world unrest and there's not all this anxiety and fear around what tomorrow life might look like in other countries. And there's also the opportunity to remind them as they're seeking and praying to Allah for Him to rescue them, for Him to protect them, even just for them to hear from Him in any kind of way, for Him to reveal Himself. And He's not doing it because He's not the true God and they don't have a personal relationship with the true God. It's an opportunity for us to lean into that and share the hope that we have in Jesus, because the truth of the matter is, Allah might not be answering their prayers, but Jesus is answering ours. And we're living proof of answered prayers. We are answered prayers. And so we get to share that hope and that encouragement of like, hey, my God answers my prayers and I can trust Him that He's got my best interest at heart. And there's so much proof behind that. Like if I look back at my life, there's so many examples I can share of how God has answered my prayers. And I think we can use that to encourage our friends who are not hearing from their God that, hey, maybe that's because their God isn't the one true God.
That conversation brought up a lot to think about. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that faith isn't just something personal, it can also shape how we see and respond to what's happening in the world around us. And when it comes to conversations about different beliefs, especially across cultures, it's important to approach them with both truth, compassion, and understanding. This isn't always easy, especially when the topics are connected to conflict or tension, but it's something that requires both understanding and intentionality. If you want to learn more about this topic, in my Issue 5 article, I wrote more about the war in Iran and how faith has been impacted. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Voice of Verve. Today, we heard two very different stories, but both remind us of the importance of learning, listening, and staying engaged with the world around us. From experiencing history in Washington, D.C. to thinking more deeply about faith and global issues, these conversations are just a small part of what we're covering in Issue 5. If you haven't already, be sure to check out the full newspaper to read more, including the article connected to today's episode. And as always, thank you for being a part of the Verve community. I'm Finley, and this has been the Voice of Verve.